Okay. We're about ready to begin. And let's share. Okay. So, our Torah reading today deals with we're starting on, the Torah reading this week is a double reading. It is Leviticus chapter 12, the Parsha Tazria, through the end of Leviticus chapter 15, Metzora. And the primary subject of this week's Torah reading is tzaras, which is some kind of physical skin condition, which the rabbis teach is a physical manifestation of a spiritual illness, such that when a person has this manifestation, they are considered spiritually unclean, and they have to go through a ritual purification process. So we don't follow these practices in our time, the observance of tzaras. However, we are called, I think, to learn this teaching and to try and find its relevance in our life today. So starting from chapter 13, page 461. And the Lord spoke unto Moshe and Aaron, saying, Adam, a man, a person, ki yeh v'or b'saro, if on his skin, in his flesh, shall be se'es or sapachas or vaheres, a rising or a scab or a bright spot. V'haya v'or b'saro l'negat tzarat, and it shall be on the skin of his flesh, this plague of tzaras. V'huva el Aharon haKohen, o el achad mibanav haKohanim, and he shall be brought to Aaron the high priest, or to one of his sons, the priests.
So in English, that's why they call it psoriasis. They took it from sarat.
You might say that tzaras sounds like psoriasis. Tsaris also, yeah. It's translated as leprosy, but it's not the same. I think the difference, by the way, between leprosy and even psoriasis and tsaras is that tsaras, this disease, is considered by the Torah to be curable. It's expected to go away in 7 to 14 days if we read the text. Whereas the classic diseases of tsaras, of leprosy, is not curable, and neither is psoriasis. I mean, nowadays they have certain treatments for psoriasis, and they kind of tend to flare up and go away, but they're not really inherently curable. They don't go away and never come back, right? It's something that has to be managed. So I think that in any case, the teaching of the Torah, if we're going to read this as a teaching, we want to focus on what is the message in this teaching rather than what are the historical facts that it's referring to. I'll give you an example. Let's say that we would find an old text from, I don't know, let's say, imagine in 500 years from now, somebody was reading a sermon given by a rabbi in 2020. And they would read how the rabbi is speaking about something called coronavirus, okay? And is giving a whole spiritual teaching to his congregation using the coronavirus as an example. Or he could be using, Major League Baseball as an example. And we want so much to understand the message that this rabbi is giving, and we'll begin to have a deep dive analysis on what Major League Baseball was 500 years ago, right? Remember, we're reading this in 500 years. Or a deep dive analysis on what the coronavirus was 500 years ago. And all the while, we'd be missing the point of what the spiritual teaching that this rabbi was trying to give. Now, the truth is you may not be able to have the richness of what this teaching is if you don't understand the example being brought. But the point is not to focus on the facts of the example, but to use the facts of the example to take the message. There's I'll give you another. The Lubavitcher Rebbe said once gave a talk on the spiritual message, the spiritual lessons that one can learn from football. Okay, and he talks about how two teams of people are struggling for control of the same ball, and he uses that as an example to try and give a teaching about how as Jews we see ourselves in a struggle for the spiritual actualization of the world, right? So now there are a bunch of people who are arguing over whether the Rebbe was referring to American football or to what we call soccer, which in Europe is called football. And they're arguing back and forth, and they're analyzing the text. What is the likelihood that the Rebbe would have referred to it as football in America? On the one hand, he refers to a ball, which indicates maybe that it's like soccer because it's spherical, and the globe is spherical, and the Rebbe referred to the sphere, or or on the other hand, understanding that the Rebbe is an American context and he's speaking to American students, and it's more likely to have if he was referring to soccer, he more likely would refer to soccer, and football was very popular. And we can also look at the season in which the Rebbe was speaking. It was the winter season, so maybe it was the football season then, maybe it was around the Super Bowl. And all the while we missed the point. The Rebbe is trying to tell us that we have to be a team, and that we have to work hard to try and be connected to each other, and to try and to reach our goals. So you understand what I'm saying? Like, we get into this. Sometimes we fall into this trap of trying to look at the Torah from a historical lens, and in doing so, we miss the point. Another example. maybe I mentioned this once or twice before. There are two types of people who watch E.T. You know the movie E.T., Steven Spielberg? I watched E.T. and I confess it made me cry. When I watched E.T., I cried. Did you cry when you watched E.T.? No, you don't remember. Who cries when they watch E.T.? So there's two types of people who watch this movie.
I had tears. I didn't cry,
You didn't cry. Okay.
but I had tears. Like,
You had tears. Okay, so you got close to crying. That counts for crying. What's the type of person? So there's two types of people who watch the movie. Some people who just shut up and watch the movie, and other people who say, wait, is this a true story? Did it really happen? The person who asks, is it a true story? Did it really happen? Is not going to cry when he watches the movie. But the person who connects to the story, right? There's two things. One is the fact element, the historicity, the looking at it as I'm telling you this because it happened. Then you're not connecting with the story. You're not connecting with the heart in the story. If a person connects with the heart in the story, then they don't care if it happened or not. Because they're connecting with themselves. They're seeing. Why does a person cry when they see, even if it, right? Even if they believe, you want to say they suspended their disbelief. So maybe they think it happened, but it's over already. It happened. Why are you crying over spilt milk? E.T. is stuck. Okay, E.T. phone home, or he's gone, or whatever it was the moment that you cried. It's over already. Or Bambi, I don't know, she's dead. Move on. The reason why we cry is because when we feel that story, we connect ourselves in the moment to that story. We feel right now we're feeling that's not a story about an alien or about a deer. That's a story about a little boy who feels alone, who misses his home. And I feel a little bit alone right now. And because I'm still a little boy inside. So when we see that story, we connect with that part of us that's still alive, that story about us, that's that part of us that's for which that story is still happening right now. So this is what I'm trying to say. This is, I think, the way that we're supposed to read the Torah. You have a whole cottage industry of historians who are analyzing what is this, what is that. Come on, E.T. phone home. You know what I mean? Let's connect with the story. What's going on over here? So, what is the story behind Saras? The story behind Saras is a person who feels damaged. Person who feels damaged. Do you feel damaged? I feel damaged sometimes. So the Baal Shem Tov says there's three different types of plagues here. There's Se'es, Sapachas, and Beheras. A rising, a scab, or a bright spot. And Baal Shem Tov says this might refer to three different types of circumstances in which a person might feel damaged, spiritually damaged. Se'es comes from uplifting, right? We said arising. So sometimes a person can be damaged, can feel damaged when they're trying to rise. It can be because they're trying to climb and they feel frustrated. There's another kind of damage that comes from rising. And we have to recognize what this is. Whenever we graduate, we will become newly frustrated. Meaning, a boy or girl was in middle school, in 8th grade. And in 8th grade, they're the top. And then they graduate 8th grade. And in 9th grade, they become the bottom. Right? And then they grow and grow and grow, 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. Finally, they're the top. And they graduate high school and they go to college and then they become a freshman. They went from knowing everything to knowing nothing. But not because they fell, it feels like a fall, but really it's a rising. Sometimes a rising feels like a falling. Sometimes a rising feels like damage. So that's one thing. We have to know that sometimes a yerida, a descent, is tzorech aliyah, is part of the process of ascent. Then we have sapachas. There's another type of damage. Sapachas is a scab. What's a scab? It's a collection of cells that become attached to each other. And we have to, so this, he says, is the kind of damage that a person feels, damage by association. Sometimes the environment that we're in, sapachas, ben adam nischaf, we're swept in by a mob or by a social environment. It's a feeling damaged by association. So we have to take a look. Who am I hanging out with? Who am I associating with? Who are my friends on Facebook? Who am I following on Twitter? Are these people causing me to feel damaged, or are these people causing me to feel uplifted? And it's a real question that we have to ask ourselves. Are these people picking me up, or are these people slowing me down? So that's the sapachas. The heres is brightness. Sometimes I am dimming my eyes with my own brightness. And again, this can be in a positive or negative sense. Or it could be a deficiency of strength or a deficiency of weakness. The heres might mean brightness, where I have a misguided view of myself. I think that I'm brighter than I am. And when I do that, I will, that itself is a kind of damage. That or maybe I am engaging in spiritual work in a shiny way, in a way that looks spiritual on the outside, but isn't like shiny, bright, but on the inside is disconnected. That can be. And sometimes, on a positive sense, it could be a strength, is that I have so much to give, I have so much bubbling forth within me that I feel that I end up feeling, and if I don't have a proper channel and I don't have a proper place to put that rush of spiritual aspiration or teaching, or I have a sense that there is what to give, and I haven't found where who is receiving that. So that can sometimes leave a person to become closed up. So we have the Se'es, the rising, in which a person is frustrated as they try to climb, or they are feeling damaged or incapable because they have recently graduated to a higher level. Osapachas, or a scab, which is the kind of damage that comes by association because of the company one keeps and the inputs that one is receiving. Ovaheras, or brightness, it either comes from a person feeling damaged because they aren't spiritually connected with what they're doing, it's only brightness, or because they are overwhelmed without being channeled. They don't have a channel to express their spirituality. In all of these cases, the answer is V'huva el Aaron HaKohen. The person shall be brought to Aaron the high priest. By being brought to Aaron the high priest, that which reflects associating yourself with holy people. All of these things reflect humility, right? Associating oneself with a holy person requires a certain degree of humility, and it addresses, in a sense, all of these different spiritual maladies. When a person, what bothers us? Let's go through them one by one. What bothers us when we are climbing and we are frustrated? It's the sense that as we climb, we have an expectation of success, of accomplishment. And when we don't reach that accomplishment and success, then we become frustrated. So the answer to that is to have humility, or not to be so concerned with oneself, not to be so concerned with self-actualization. And that also addresses that kind of low that comes from being a freshman, that comes from being new at something, after just having graduated, being experienced. And so that humility can help a person to just go with the flow, and to be more, can help them tolerate this unfortunate but ultimately positive phenomenon. Then sapachas, being associated with having a toxic environment, is also can be helped by being associated with holy people, again, by humbling oneself. Why is it that we're hanging around toxic people? Ultimately, that's a choice, right? So much of the reason why we do that is because it's feeding something in us that isn't good for us, and somehow we continue to do it. We do it because it makes us feel good in a way while being bad for us. And so, sometimes we associate with people that aren't healthy because we feel good in their presence. We feel better about ourselves. Just think, I talked about who am I friends with on Facebook, who do I follow on Twitter. Sometimes we hang around people who are pointing out negativity the whole time because it makes us feel superior. We feel like we're on a higher level than them. We know better. We have the answer. They're causing a problem. They are corrupt. They are, misguided. And so what that does is it gives us a temporary good feeling. We have kind of the satisfaction of outrage, but ultimately it's not good for us because we become angry and bitter and frustrated. Why are we doing that? It's because we enjoy, if there's kind of a gratifying feeling in feeling superior, but there's a side effect, which is outrage.
sort of like the way that people always complain about their health. The first thing they tell you about is all their problems.
Yeah.
Really boring.
Yeah, it's boring. And, in this case, I'm thinking more in terms of people who complain about political corruption. Right? It's unhealthy. Why are people obsessing, spending so much time and energy over negativity regarding which they have no control? It's because I want to feel good about my party. And in order to do that, I point out how corrupt your party is. It's toxic. It's just toxic. It's destructive. So again, humility is the answer, and associating with holy people is the answer, being brought to Aaron the Kohen. And then similarly with the bright spot, again, the answer is humility and associating with holy people, because the bright spot is humility. Again, if we're not concerned with ourselves, then we're not then how I look isn't enough. We're talking about spirituality that looks bright on the outside. If I'm truly humble, then that doesn't blind me. What happens is when a person is appears spiritual on the outside, they have a bright looking spirituality, and then ultimately they become frustrated. It's an inevitable that they'll become frustrated. That happens because they were caught up in the allure, meaning they thought they had something that they actually never had, and that's why they're frustrated. They thought they had something that they actually never had. And when we believe that we are being spiritually connected, and then we turn around and it's gone, and we feel bereft, that's because we were blinded by a bright looking spirituality which actually never was. And if we had been more humble in the moment, we would have realized that wasn't it, and we would have taken the additional steps necessary to reach true spiritual fulfillment. And that will come when we associate with holy people. And the same goes for a person who has so much to give and no one to give it to. Sometimes the answer is to receive more. It can be reinvigorating. So that's part one. Se'es sapachas overheres. Now I want to skip to all the way to Parsha Metzora. We will turn to page 470, which is chapter 14, Leviticus chapter 14, verse 2. Zos tihiyeh Toras HaMetzora Yom Taharaso. This shall be the law of the one who had saras on the day he becomes purified. This shall be the law of the one who had saras on the day he becomes purified, and he is brought to the Kohen. Baal Shem Tov says a fascinating thing about this. He says, this shall be the Torah. Read this text properly. This shall be the Torah of the Metzora, of the one who had tzaras. So many ways this phrase could have been written. It could be, this is the law of the Metzora, or more precisely, this is the law of the purification of the Metzora. Zos tiyeh Torat Taharat HaMetzora. This shall be the law, right? This shall be the law of the purification process of the day of purification of the one with leprosy. But no, the one with tzaras. It doesn't say that. Instead, it says, this is the Torah. In a sense, you could read it, this is the Torah that belongs to the one who has tzaras. The Torah belongs to a person who feels damaged. Interesting. On the day of his purification. Says the Baal Shem Tov, actually, every one of us takes the Torah with us wherever we go. By that, he means we are not just living our lives. We live our lives with collateral influence. There is a collateral impact to everything we do. And so many things are affected by our behavior. And when we conduct ourselves properly, we elevate, we give a higher purpose to a whole host of factors which contributed to that. So to give an example, right now we're learning Torah. We're learning Torah using a book, a computer, a webcam, a table, and a room. In this room is a light fixtures, electricity, so many contributing materials that are participating in making possible what's happening in this moment. Now, let's imagine that the book has feelings, the computer has feelings, the webcam has feelings, the electricity has feelings, right? All of those things are saying, why am I alive right now? What am I doing here? And then, because actually they can't determine, they can't control what they can't control what happens to them. They can't control the meaningfulness of their life. I control the meaningfulness of their life. And the truth is, there are people involved who do have feelings, meaning there's a person working in a factory in China, and there's a technician working in a power plant in upstate New York. And they're all slaving away to make possible all the things that we're doing right now. And whether their life has meaning and purpose or not is not in their control, it's in my control. If they say, a person who works in a power plant says, I am making electricity to help people, right? It's a very meaningful job. I power New York City, the greatest city in the world. But whether that's a true statement or a believable statement, at the very least, or actually true in fact at the most, is determined by whether I am a Metzora biyom taharato, whether I am a person with tsaras who is facing the day of his purification. Right? This tension between being a Metzora, being a person with tsaras on the day of his purification, is both of these factors, that I feel damaged and that I am on my purification day, are both necessary for this dynamic to work. Because if there's no such thing as a person with tsaras, then the person in the power plant has no purpose, because life is always good. Instead, however, the person in the power plant has to know that I help people solve their problems. I help people see in the dark. I help people power technology. I help people use technology that allows them to overcome borders and boundaries and limitations. Right? All of those statements require the existence of darkness, boundaries, limitations, and problems. The Metzora on the day of his purification. So when I manifest my day of purification, I give purpose, meaning, and fulfillment to the existence of all of those who participated in my existence today. And this is symbolized by the Torah, in the sense that the Torah is kind of a token to the Torah is a token to express this idea, because the Torah has no ability to control its own destiny. I control its destiny. The Torah is inherently meaningful, but whether it's actually meaningful only depends on whether I will be a Metzora on the day of my purification. And so the Torah is waiting for me. It's my Torah. It's Torah HaMetzora. It belongs to me, because without me, it's nothing. The Huva El HaKohen, the Holy Zohar, says this refers to God. By being the Metzora on the day of the purification, I am bringing Torah to God. Because by giving us free choice, in a sense, God becomes helpless. Or God becomes reliant on my willingness to be purified. So we have a lot more power and influence and importance than we give ourselves credit for. The whole Torah relies on us. You know, even when we think about the whole Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu, who taught the Torah, is relying on us. Whether or not Moshe Rabbeinu's life mattered depends on me. If I approach, if I take the challenge and try to seek tahara and try to seek purification, then Moshe Rabbeinu's life mattered. If I don't, even though there be thousands, millions who did, but to a certain degree, to the degree that I could have been influenced, Moshe Rabbeinu's life was futility. Because I could have been influenced and I wasn't. Again, the tension between, or the holding the space for both the problem and the solution. The Torah is useless in a world with no problems. And the Torah is useless when we don't attempt the solutions. And so problems are as important for the existence and importance of the Torah as the solutions are. Metzora b'yom taharato.